With that, please give a warm welcome to our speaker, Nigel Farage.
It's a lovely intro. Thank you ever so much.
I hope you don't mind me.
Thank you ever so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you. Thank you. Good evening. Good evening. Well, Francis, thank you for that very warm, very kind introduction. And good evening, North Carolina. I did that on the stage with Trump in Mississippi. I've never been so nervous in all my life. I've turned up in Mississippi, and I've been told by Governor Phil Bryant that I'm going to speak at a fundraising dinner, and that Trump's going to be there, and was I happy and comfortable with that? I said, yeah, I can't see the problem. That's fine. So we had a dinner a bit like this, and I met up with Donald, who I'd not met before. We tried to meet a couple of times, it hadn't happened, but I met now your 45th president, I'm pleased to say. So we met, and I spoke at this dinner like this, and I said to the dinner, I said, look, in Brexit, what we did was we gathered people together. We forgot about left or right in politics. We focused more on right or wrong in politics. We took on the liberal media. We took on people like CNN. That's better. We took on the big battalions in Brussels, the Junckers, the Van Rompuys. We took on the Tony Blairs. We took on these people and we beat them. And I said, Trump represents everything that we in Brexit represented. The bringing back of democracy, the giving of a voice to ordinary people. Anyway, I did my stuff at this dinner. I thought, well, I haven't done too badly, you know, it's all right. And the Donald seemed to vaguely like it. And next we were off to the basketball stadium in Jackson, Mississippi. 18,000 people packing out the stadium, waiting for Trump to speak. And I was there as a guest, and I was looking forward to seeing what Trump would do with this crowd. Little did I know, 10 minutes before the speech began, Stephen Miller, who'd previously worked for Jeff Sessions, and by the way, wasn't Jeff Sessions brilliant this week in fighting back against the lies that are being put out by the establishment, and more of that later. So Stephen Miller, who I'd known for some years, came up to me at 7:20 with the event due to start at 7:30, and there's 18,000. It's like a bloody rock concert with Trump, you know. And Stephen Miller says, Nigel, he says, we'd like you to speak. So I'm sorry. He said, no, we'd like you to speak, and Donald's going to introduce you. So Trump comes over. He says, when I get to this bit of my speech, I say, the next speaker up is a man who fought the establishment. The next speaker up is a man who had terrible things said about him. The next speaker up is going to be you. I said, what, Donald, you're the warm-up act. So I got up there that evening, and I don't think I've ever been so nervous in all my life. And I started with, as I did this evening here, good evening, Mississippi, and they all cheered. And you know what? I was the only political figure that was involved in both the Brexit campaign and in the Trump campaign. I was the only political figure in the entire United Kingdom to stand up and say that I thought Trump had the right qualities to be a president for this country. And I've been used to my fair share of abuse over the years, but I got more abuse over supporting Trump than anything I've ever done before in my life. And you know what? It was worth every single little bit of it. So I'm pleased to be here tonight in North Carolina. I'm pleased to be here with Civitas, but I have to say, Francis, one very major criticism thus far of what has happened. I am disappointed to be your guest speaker tonight, to the point of being offended. There are no protesters outside. What is going on? I mean, you're ruining my reputation. I want to see people out there who haven't washed for months with bits of metal all over their faces. This is what I expect. Now, 2016, folks, 2016 was the most incredible year in global politics. It was the beginning of a great fight back against establishment politics, where the left and the right had become virtually indistinguishable from each other. I simply couldn't tell. When Romney took on Obama, I simply couldn't tell what the policy differentiation was. I couldn't see it. I'd seen it coming together. And in my country, I'd seen the entire political class happy to hand over the governance of our ancient country, our proud ancient country, to a bunch of unelected, aging, useless old men based in Brussels. And any of you that have watched my helpful, constructive contributions in the European Parliament will know this is a point that I've spoken about. But 2016 was the year, and for me, and I'd been campaigning on this for 25 years. I'd almost convinced myself that I was on the verge of becoming the patron saint of lost causes. But I kind of kept on going. And it's tough to describe the feeling when I realized at about 3 o'clock in the morning that we were going to get our country back, that we'd won this referendum. And I had that same feeling on November the 8th, as all the stories, all the news came through, and I watched CNN that night, because why? Do you know what was better than Brexit? Do you know what was better than Trump winning? The faces of the CNN presenters. So we won these amazing victories. And yet here we are, nearly 1 year on from Brexit, 7 or 8 months on from the victory of Donald Trump. And I think these are rather more sober, reflective moments, because what we realize is that the enemy that we beat last year are rather like Japanese soldiers in World War II who were found on remote islands 10 years later, who still refuse to accept the result and wanted to keep on fighting. The difference is the opposition now are fighting even more dirty than they did in all the years before. In the case of Brexit, we have been through in the last few weeks the most astonishing self-inflicted wound. On the day before the general election, 70% of the United Kingdom, regardless of how they'd voted in that referendum, now accepted the result to be a democratic mandate, realized that the threats that, we'd been told if we voted Brexit, the stock market would collapse, that our property values would collapse. We were almost told that a plague of black locusts may well descend upon our country. And from a settled view that 70% wanted Brexit to go ahead, We then had our Prime Minister, Theresa May, call through what I think is purely hubris, a general election, and then blow that lead. And now we have a parliament that, whilst we will get Brexit, we may find ourselves getting Brexit in name only. In that we probably will go on paying money, we probably will go on with the free movement of people, and I'm very worried that what I'd fought for and the reasons for which I stood down are perhaps on the edge of being betrayed by people who have no respect for nation state, by people who have no respect for the democratic process. So at some point, regrettably, whether it's now or a bit in the future, I fear that I may well have to put my uniform on again and head for the front lines. And before I get on to Trump, can I just say this? I felt President Obama did more damage to the relationship that has existed between my country and your country than any other president in history. I thought it was repulsive to see him in London a month before the referendum saying that if Britain opted for Brexit, we as a country, in the view of America, would go to the back of the line. How dare Obama damage everything that we've stood and fought for over the years? And I say that with passion, because last Tuesday was the 6th of June. Last Tuesday was the 73rd anniversary of D-Day. And I went, and it sounds like naval gunfire, doesn't it? Well, there was a fair bit 73 years ago, wasn't there? But I went to D-Day, the anniversary last Tuesday, and what an amazing emotional thing it was to do. And if we think about that day, what happened? The Americans had 2 beaches. The British had 2 beaches. The amazing, brave Canadians, small nation that they are, had a beach. The English-speaking, liberty-loving, democracy-loving nations of the world had come together in the most extraordinary military endeavor that mankind has ever engineered and put together. It was us that freed Europe, that freed the Western world, that gave liberty. And we should be enormously proud of what our grandparents and our parents achieved on that day and in the tough months that followed. And any of you in this room that have never been to Omaha, that have never seen that American military cemetery, that have never perhaps fully emotionally understood what your country did to help us and the rest of the world to regain democratic, sovereign, decent, proper values, then before you die, please go to Omaha and pay respect to the Americans that went before you. It matters hugely. But to see an American president in the shape of Obama, who didn't care about any of that, who was happy to see us, your greatest ally, lose our ability to make our own decisions, well, I was really upset. But you know what the good thing was? The British public was so upset that I reckon Obama was worth 2% to the Leave campaign. So thank you. And as for Trump, well, Trump, of course, won on November the 8th. And he won on a ticket that said it was time the values of ordinary people were put first. Trump won on a ticket of saying he wanted to make America safer against the threats and the perils that were now facing the world from something called extreme jihadism, something called Islamic extremism, words that Hillary Clinton could not even bring herself to utter. Such is the denial of the left in the West as to what they've done to our societies, to our communities, and to the safety of our children and grandchildren. Thank God Trump won that election. But whilst we face in the United Kingdom a self-inflicted error from a Prime Minister who in the campaign backed the other side, and a Prime Minister who frankly is a dud, she's just no good, and the sooner the Conservative Party get rid of her and get somebody governing our country and going into these negotiations that believes in Brexit, the better. I mean, how can you lead the nation into the biggest, most fundamental talks we've had since 1945, who, when she's asked 4 times on television as a Remainer, does she now believe in Brexit, simply can't answer the question? We need somebody of integrity. We do. And in America, what's going on? I think with Trump, what is happening here is worse than what is going on in the United Kingdom. Now, of course, I make these comments as somebody who is now a person of interest to the FBI. There are all sorts of media stories that get written about you when you're well known in politics. But the idea that I'm some Russian agent that was the link man between Bannon and Trump, Julian Assange and President Putin is frankly the biggest load of balderdash I've ever read in my life. But it doesn't matter to me because I can laugh it off. It doesn't matter to me because all that happens to me is I get cartoons done about me without a pint of beer and a cigarette for a change, just wearing a Russian hat. But what is going on in America? Every single day, I find really, genuinely shocking, and so do the gods from the sound of it. Every single day, there is a story about Trump or a Trump associate and links with the Russians. You know, if you've shaken hands with the Russian ambassador at a cocktail party, suddenly you're working for the Russian government. And it gets worse. If you don't answer the question properly, you're suddenly obstructing justice. And what is going on in this country, folks, in my view, as an outsider, is this. Your founding fathers, keen to break away well, there we are. But I mean, listen, George III wasn't all that good, really, was he, you know? I mean, but your founding fathers, keen to break away from actually a pretty corrupt monarch and quite a bad way. I mean, we would agree with that too. George III was not top dollar, all right? But your founding fathers got together. They were men of the most extraordinary intellect. They wrote an incredible constitution. For what has become a very great country. But what they could never, ever have foreseen was the growth of the legal system in this country and the growth of big government and self-interest in Washington. You only have to go to Washington to see the buildings, to see the number of people, to see the social life that goes with working as part of that club, to realize that the one thing all those tens of thousands of folks who are paid so much more than ordinary American workers, the one thing those folks in Washington don't want is change of any kind at all, because they are very happy with their lot. And when a president comes along that wants to threaten and challenge all of that, on behalf of ordinary American people, they fight back. And every single obstruction is being put in the way of Trump. It is being done by the judges. It is being done by members of his own party in Congress. It is being done now by elements of the security services and a traditional, conventional, liberal media who've lost all rationale in terms of reporting the truth and are pure political campaigners. Folks, I think it is disgusting that a man that is elected on a ticket who says he will do these things is being stopped from doing them. It reflects very badly, folks, on America. And I'm sorry to say that, but it does. But the one thing I've learned about Trump, ever since that first meeting in Mississippi, through to having dinner with him in the Trump Hotel the other month in Washington, is he's a man who is full of real surprises. Now, I don't mean the last tweet he sent out, which often surprises all of us. What I mean is this. He was 71 this week. He doesn't need to do any of this. He is rich, he is famous, he's got a great family, and wow, aren't they a great family? They really are an amazing family, actually. You know, he loves his golf, he's got a great life. He doesn't need to do any of this, but he's doing this because he believes in a certain set of values. He's doing this because he wants to redress the balance. He's doing this because he sees the political class in America and across much of the West, which is why, of course, he supported Brexit. He sees these people as being self-serving. He sees these people as acting in their own interests. And when I had dinner with him a couple of months ago in the Trump Hotel in Washington, which, if you've got lots of money to spend, it's great, you know, but I stayed there last night. I looked at the bill. I said, no, there must have been a mistake. But anyway, what fascinated me, and I would never, ever, ever betray a single word that was said between us, because we trust each other, and that matters. And that's important. But I'll tell you this about him at that meeting. He was beginning to face the full onslaught that we now see on a daily basis. When we talked about this, he kind of looked into the middle of the table and said, I have been elected by the American people to do these things, and I am going to do them. And that you see, the easy thing would be to bend, wouldn't it? The easy thing would be to be like Theresa May and U-turn. Oh, by the way, Theresa May U-turns on everything. She U-turns on every policy. She even U-turned in the election on policies before the election had taken place. And then she was interviewed by a newspaper called City AM, which is about the financial district in London. And the last question was, Prime Minister, if you came for lunch in the City of London, where would you go? Would you go to the upmarket Coq d'Argent? Or would you go to the downmarket Simpson's Tavern Chop House? And she said, I'd go to Simpson's Tavern Chop House. At which the editor said, Do you realize Nigel Farage has been lunching there for 35 years? At which he said, oh, well, I'll change my mind then. So our Prime Minister even U-turns on where she wants to go to lunch. But Trump isn't like that. And what Trump has got is something that I don't think any of the commentators have seen or ever commented on, but I've seen it up close and personal. This man has tremendous moral courage and he needs to be supported. He really does. And there may be those of you in this room who find him difficult to take. There may be those of you in this room who don't agree with all of his policies. Those of you in this room who find him a bit rough round the edges. Those of you in this room who can't believe his Twitter feed. But you know, when he talks about the threat of terrorism, when he talks about the threat of jihadism, just look at what has been happening in my beloved country over the last few weeks. Just look. I mean, can you actually even believe that a suicide bomber went to a concert of teenage girls to try and inflict maximum damage? Look at what happened in London Bridge. Look at the figures that for the first time ever, we've now been told that there are nearly 3,500 suspected terrorists living in the United Kingdom and a further 20,000 known already to the authorities living in the United Kingdom who are accomplices or friends or linked to ISIS or jihadism. Our horrible nightmare with jihadi terrorism has probably, I'm sad to say, I hope I'm wrong, but probably only just begun. All right? And it's the same in France, and it's the same in Belgium, and it's the same in Sweden, and it's the same in many European countries. And yet your president, for trying to stand up and protect ordinary Americans from these horrors, is called by the New York Times and by CNN and everybody else a racist, an extremist, an Islamophobe. And the Trump that I know is none of those things. He is trying to protect you and your country. And I want to say this to all of you, because I know that many of you in the room have your reservations about him. But I want to say this to all of you in this room, that all of you have got congressmen and have got senators who, given that you're politically active, are liable to being lobbied. And what I want you to do is to lobby in writing or by going to meeting. Lobby your congressmen, lobby your senators, and help this president get the legislation through that will make America safe again. Get the legislation through. Get the legislation through that will ease the burden of regulation of small and medium-sized businesses. What the hell has happened to free market capitalism? Where's it gone? Where's it gone? You know, the days of Thatcher and Reagan, the days of lifting the burden of regulation off the backs of men and women that wanted to start up businesses has disappeared as we head into a world of global corporatism. We head into a world where the big multinationals and the big banks and big politics and big bureaucracy actually design a rule book that make it virtually impossible for men and women to set up their own businesses. Trump wants to do that too. Please, folks, you can do something here. Lobby your senators. Lobby your congressmen. Lobby for this obstruction against what Trump wants to do. Lobby to be free. lobby for liberty, lobby to get rid of excessive regulation, lobby to be strong, lobby for America to be, once again, a great country. This man can do it for you. He deserves your support. Thank you.
Mr. Farage, two questions actually. So the first
Two?
is for those
That's
of us,
cheating, but go on.
for those of us who have seen the clips of you in Belgium, what would be your favorite moment? Because they're really entertaining from our perspective. That, and then I guess the second question for those of us who have golfed in Scotland, where do you think the referendum on Scottish independence is going?
Okay, Scotland, forget it. The SNP, the hard left Marxist SNP, were pushing a completely false prospectus. They were saying we can be independent, we can leave the United Kingdom and be part of the European Union. You can't be independent and be in a union who make your laws, whose courts overrule you. The whole thing was a completely false prospectus. Scottish nationalism is now dead. Scotland is staying part of the United Kingdom. I'm pleased to say, and by the way, so is your president, whose mother, of course, came from a Scottish island, who himself owns two absolutely amazing golf courses. And you know, when I'm retired, I go and play them. So that's all over. Now, what were my favourite moments as an MEP in the European Parliament? Well, there are two that really stand out. The first is the day after the referendum. I turned up in the European Parliament. There was a big emergency session, and I walked in. I was feeling quite happy with things, and I met Mr. Juncker, and he shook hands. He said, "Bastard." I mean, to be fair, in quite a funny way. And I didn't know what reception I'd get when I stood up. What are they going to do? And I couldn't believe about 400 of them just started booing me. So I thought, do you know what? I've had enough of this. I'm going to tell you what I really think. So I said, when I came here 17 years ago, I said I would lead a campaign to take the United Kingdom out of the European Union. And you all laughed at me. Well, I said, you're not laughing now. So that went off. And the other one, you must indulge me, I'm sorry. Even if you don't like it, I do. The other one was, in 2010, they announced that the European Union would have a new president. We were told it would be all right, bit of divine guidance. It's not all bad, is it? You know. We were told it was going to be a man of such stature that he would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing. I thought, crikey, who've they got? You know. Anyway, we got this bloke called Herman Van Rompuy, who, and you know, you should never be rude about people, really, but well, it's quite fun. You know, he turned up, I mean, straggly haired, you know, he couldn't even be bothered to sort of trim himself up. The worst suit I've ever seen, and plastic injection moulded shoes. And I thought, well, this isn't a very good start. He then gave this 17-minute dirge-like speech, and it was time to respond. And of course, they all get up, you know, the leader of the Christian Democrats and the Socialists and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, and they all get up and say, what a wonderful chap he is, you know, that's marvellous, absolutely marvellous. What a wonderful, marvellous. This sort of thing. And I thought, well, he's not all that marvellous. And I know lots of you here will be terrified of public speaking. People are. They're terrified of public speaking. And they have to do it at a wedding. They have to do it at a christening. They maybe even have to do it at a funeral. And people are absolutely terrified of getting up to speak. And I've always got a piece of advice for them. I always say, don't use notes. Don't look down when you're speaking to an audience. Look up when you're speaking to an audience. And remember, when you have to do this, nearly all of them will be on your side. And actually, In this sense, style matters more than content. So on this day, I spoke without notes, but of course, almost nobody in that room was actually on my side on that day. And the danger of speaking without notes is that even you yourself never quite know what's going to come out. So I said we were told, Mr. Van Rompuy, that when Europe had its first president, he'd be a man that would stop the traffic in Washington and Beijing. I said, and what we got was you. I said, I don't wish to be rude. Now, any of you have ever had teenage kids will know if they say, Dad, I don't want to be rude, but they're going to be quite rude. I said, I don't wish to be rude, but, and where the next bit came from, I will never know. But it'll probably go on my gravestone. I said, you have the charisma of a damp rag, the appearance of a low-grade bank clerk, and the question I want to ask, the question we all want to ask is, who are you? I said, I've never heard of you. No one's ever, I mean, and by this time, it was like hand grenades going off. I mean, they were all screaming and shouting, and I should be sanctioned, and I should be kicked out of the parliament, and it was all getting pretty ropey. And I sat down and thought, oh, I've done it this time, you know. And so, later on that afternoon, I was told to report to the President of the Parliament's office at 9 o'clock the next morning. Now, having had a fairly tempestuous time at a very old-fashioned English private school, I was fairly used to this sort of thing. You know, I mean, 9 a.m., outside the headmaster's office, textbook down my trousers, you know, before 6 of the best and all that sort of thing. Well, it's what made England great. Come on, what's the matter with you? So in I went to be told that unless I apologised for what I'd done, the Parliament would impose the maximum fine they could on anybody. So I was about to be fined the same amount for saying what I'd said, actually in a humorous way, as if I'd been caught for corruption. Such is the impingement on free speech, folks, that is going on right throughout the Western world. All right, just, you know, hoist that point on board. Anyway, so I told them politely where I thought they should go. I left the meeting, and the media, like 40 cameras, you know, flashlights going, because they'd obviously been tipped off what would happen, and they'd expected I'd back down. So they're all screaming at me, have you apologised? Have you apologised? And I said, quiet, folks. I said, look, I said, there are times in life when I think you've got to be a man and stand up and admit what you've got wrong. To hold your hands up and say, sorry. And I am now saying sorry. I apologise if I've caused offence to bank clerks anywhere in the world. So there we are. Sorry, that was a bit long, but I enjoyed it.
No, that was good.
So,
Sorry.
hello. Test, hello. So 2016 and 2017 have each been marked by a stunning electoral defeat. 2016 was one that I think everyone in this room was happy about, the defeat of Hillary Clinton in the presidential election.
Yeah.
2017, the most stunning defeat to date was the Conservatives and Theresa May in the snap election that they called. Where did the Conservatives go wrong over the course of calling the snap election? Why did they lose that election? And what does it mean for the future of Brexit?
Never ask the electorate to vote unnecessarily. The next general election was scheduled for 2020. We had legislation in our parliament that backed that up. What she did was to use a manoeuvre to change the legislation to call an early legislation. Once an argument is over, Once an argument is won, I bet any lawyer in the room will back me up on this. Once you've won the argument, never reopen it. Why would you do that? But she reopened it on Brexit, having herself back the other side, then repeatedly refused to say she believed in it, just she was doing the will of the people, and then events took over. And what happened was, the election in the end wasn't about Brexit, the election was about the personality of our Prime Minister against the bearded Marxist who runs the Labour Party. Now, I don't believe in anything Jeremy Corbyn supports. You know, he's a vegetarian. Non-smoker. Teetotaler. I mean, he and I have not got a lot in common. But, no, I mean, Jeremy Corbyn is an old 1968-style Marxist. But what Corbyn is, and there's a bit of the Bernie Sanders stuff here. What Corbyn is seen to be is genuine. He's the real deal. He actually goes and meets people. He does stuff. And May didn't. And she was found out. And can I tell you that I'm sure you've all seen the horrendous pictures from Monday night, Tuesday morning of that tower block going up. I mean, you know, the towering inferno, come to life. Horrific. We don't yet know the death toll. It'll be 100 or whatever it'll be. Theresa May turns up to that. She shakes the hand of the fire chief. She shakes the hand of the police chief. She leaves. She doesn't even meet any of the victims. So basically, this general election became down to a battle of personalities, and Corbyn came out as being genuine. Corbyn came out as being real. She came out as being wooden, robotic, insincere. She's a dud, and the Tory party need to ditch her as soon as they possibly can and get a proper leader. Otherwise, we might finish up with a Marxist Prime Minister.
Hey,
Yeah, once the Conservatives finally nudge Theresa May aside, who do you think will get the top job, and who would you like to see get the top job?
Well, the favourite will be Boris. Boris Johnson. Boris. And Boris will be the favourite, but history says the favourite never wins. And Boris is very good at blowing himself up in public with all sorts of things. Who would I like to see? Well, look, the Brexit campaign meant that we were able to break our old enmities and work together. And I work with many of these people. If it's not Boris, who's the front runner, I personally would like David Davis. David Davis believes in Brexit. David Davis was a Thatcherite. David Davis believes in being a conservative. How about that? Because that's become unfashionable. So provided it's a Brexiteer, I don't mind. I don't think it will be Boris, but I think David Davis will do the job well. And if it was David Davis, I might find myself in a position where I might be able to work with them rather than fighting against them.
Hello?
please.
Nigel.
You have to raise your hand so they can see you. Don't wait till he's done talking. And when they come to you with the mic, then we'll go to you for the question. We have someone in the middle.
Nigel, I have a question for you. I'm a fellow member of the East India Club, like yourself, Oxford and Cambridge trained. And I think one of the problems in the UK is this elitism of Oxford people. You just talked about Boris, educated at Christ Church, Theresa May is educated at St. Hugh's, Oxford. And I always would say to my colleagues, imagine this 60-year-old working class woman in Hull. What has she benefited from being a member of the EU? I worked for the European Commission. I worked in Beaulieu for the DG Infoso. And the elitism of that group was just astounding to me.
Yeah, I mean, David Cameron, in some ways, took Britain back 60 years. The fact that there were 14 ministers in the British Parliament who all went to the same school, namely Eton, said that the upper classes had totally taken over control of our country again. Look, I come from a reasonably privileged background, I went to a good school. But I think for politics to work, you need to have a mix of people from different backgrounds represented in parliaments and in assemblies. Otherwise you get the disconnect. But it's not just about class. It's not just about background. It's actually about life experience. Because what I've seen emerging in the UK, in America, and all over the West is this phenomenon where, let's take my country, because I don't want to slag off America, but my country, where what we've had are a group of people who all go to the same handful of schools, who all go to the same university, who all do the same degree, who all leave at 21, 22 and go and work as researchers in parliamentary offices, who all become members of parliament aged 27, who all spend their weekdays working together, their weekends socializing together. No one plays sport, no one has any hobbies, no one has any interests. They marry each other's sisters, and we finish up being run by this very narrowly based group of people. And we have to find a way of moving aside from this culture that we want all our elected politicians to be in their late 20s, early 30s. We need to find older men and women who've done jobs, who've served in the military, who've run businesses, who've founded charities. Our democracy needs people with life experience, not career politicians. And that's where all of you can play your part and play your role. We need life experience in politics, and gosh, your 45th president has got quite a lot of that.
We have time for 2 more questions. Greg?
Thank you. Good evening. I'm interested in your perspective on the recent French elections and the future of the National Party and Marine Le Pen.
Okay, well look, let's be absolutely brutally honest. The French National Front comes out of a post-Vichy France type chauvinism mixed in with a pretty hefty dose of anti-Semitism, all right? Let's be frank. That's where it comes from, and that's where her father, who is the model of Chauvin, really comes from. Marine Le Pen is a friend of mine, all right? I make no apologies for saying that. She became leader of the party back in 2011, and she's done many things to improve the party, but she hasn't got rid of the party name. She told me herself, I can't do that all the while my father is alive. And actually, unless she does that, she can never reach her political potential. Now look, they're all claiming Macron is a great victory for the European Union. Bear this in mind. Between Le Pen, Mélenchon on the left, and Dupont-Aignan, aren't the names wonderful, by the way? And Dupont-Aignan, they got the Eurosceptics on my kind of ticket, got 47% of the first round of the French elections. Marine, being seen to be on the right, couldn't coalesce all of that. If I'd said to you 10 years ago that in the first round of the French elections, presidential elections, nearly half the people would vote Eurosceptic, you'd have said I'd gone stark, raving bonkers. So the point is that the Eurosceptic movement is on the march. It just needs to find, sometimes, the right political coalitions to make it come to fruition. Believe you me, this artificial, false attempt to force together these diverse, fascinating, amazing countries of Europe into one, under one flag, one anthem, one army, run by some old duffer like Juncker, it's never going to work. And Brexit, we're the first country to leave, not the last, okay?
Last question. I'm sorry. This is the last question.
It could last forever otherwise.
Sir,
Yes.
in, because of recent events in the UK, what do you think are the odds of them now arming the local police and letting the citizens arm themselves? What are the odds, you think?
Okay. When I'm asked what are the cultural differences in politics between America and the UK, the answer is simple: God and guns. You know, religion is a big part of American politics, a very small part of UK politics. You know, Tim Farron resigned this week as the leader of the Lib Dems, saying it was impossible to lead the Liberal Party as a committed Christian. Now, we can debate the rights and wrongs of that. The other one is guns. We have a very different attitude towards citizens carrying guns. Can I just say this to you? On the London Bridge night, 3 of these people, and by the way, isn't Trump right to call them losers? Because that's what they are. They are losers in life who get attracted to an extreme ideology. And by the way, they're all persistent drug users, every single one of them. Look at the link. Look at the links between the Paris massacres, the Berlin massacres, what happened in Manchester and London. They're all heavy drug users, and that needs some thought too. Because I worry that what people are buying as cannabis and smoking actually isn't cannabis. It's something 25 times stronger. Separate debate. But these 3 losers, okay, they drive the van over London Bridge, they mow people down, they kill a Canadian girl, the French boy goes in the river, there are others horribly injured. They get out of the van with 3 big machete knives, and they head towards the Borough Market. They're confronted by they're confronted by a British policeman, a bobby, as we call them. And he confronts these 3 people with a baton, a truncheon, a baton. He does his best. They slash him up badly. He falls. He lives. Had he been trained and carried a pistol, he'd have shot the 3 dead, and we wouldn't have had the massacres in the market. And can I tell you, there is a 100-year-old argument in the United Kingdom that we don't arm the police force, and this is the reason. And it's worth thinking about, or it was worth thinking about. The reason was, if the professional burglar gang know that the police are routinely armed, the professional burglar gang would become routinely armed, and you'd raise the stakes of gun violence. And I think actually, for many decades, that argument kind of worked. But we've never, ever in our history confronted a 5th column that lives within our own communities, that has our own passports, that hates us and wants to kill us. And I am on my radio show on LBC now leading a campaign that says we must arm all of the 120,000 policemen and policewomen in our country to nip this stuff in the bud.
And let's, before we have a final round of applause for Nigel, I want to remind you, tomorrow morning we're going to start at 7:30 in the Crabtree Ballroom over there. We're got a full day of activity for those of you coming back. If you're going to tweet about this tonight, use the hashtag CLC 2017. And please, join me with thanking our speaker, Nigel Farage.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.